The courthouse loomed like a fortress against the Washington skyline. Its columns rose like stone sentinels, carved with the weight of justice. To the crowds outside, it was just another trial. To those inside, it was a stage for a battle that could alter everything. Among the stream of lawyers, reporters, and defendants, one woman moved differently. No entourage, no lawyer, no hurried shuffle of papers in her arms. Her name was Sophia Hale. Mid-40s, streaks of gray softening her dark hair, blazer buttoned neatly over a simple black shirt. She carried herself with the calm precision of someone who had already accepted the outcome, whatever it may be. A security guard at the checkpoint studied her ID with unusual interest. "Purpose of your visit today?" he asked, tone clipped. "Witness of the prosecution," Sophia replied. Her voice was low, steady, unshaken. The guard's brows drew together. "No attorney with you?" "I don't need one." The certainty in her words lingered in the air like an echo. For a moment, the guard simply stared at her, searching for something he couldn't name. Then he waved her through. Inside Courtroom 3B, the atmosphere was taut as a drawn bowstring. The trial of Meridian Defense had dominated headlines for weeks. A private military contractor, accused of atrocities, in a war-torn region called Kazara. Entire villages wiped from the map. Civilian deaths written off as insurgent casualties. The stakes were enormous, not just for Meridian, but for the governments who quietly relied on their shadowy services. Meridian's executives sat behind a wall of gleaming attorneys, their expensive suits sharp under the fluorescent lights. They smirked, whispered, even laughed quietly as though the courtroom itself was just another boardroom they would one day own. Sophia entered quietly, folding her hands in her lap. To the casual observer, she was unremarkable, but as she sat waiting for her name to be called, her stillness drew attention. She wasn't restless like the other witnesses. She wasn't rehearsing lines with an attorney. She simply waited. When Judge Robert Harmon entered, the room rose. His reputation preceded him. A former JAG officer known for precision and discipline, a man who tolerated no theatrics. The prosecutor, Emma Rahman, rose and called a witness. "Your Honor, the government calls Sophia Hale." Sophia stood and walked to the stand. Each step was deliberate, her gaze steady, as though she had done this 100 times before. She placed her hand on the Bible, repeated the oath without hesitation, and sat. "Please state your name and occupation for the record." Emma began. "Sophia Hale. I worked as a humanitarian aid coordinator in Kazara from 2015 to 2018. From the defense table, John Westbrook, Meridian's lead attorney, immediately stood. He cut an imposing figure. Tall, silver hair, tailored suit that cost more than most people's cars. "Your Honor, we question Ms. Hale's credentials to testify about military operations in a hostile zone." Judge Harmon's eyes narrowed. "She is here to testify about what she witnessed, Mr. Westbrook, not to provide military analysis." Objection overruled. "Proceed, Ms. Rahman." For the next hour, Sophia spoke. Her words were calm, clinical almost, but the details carried weight that pressed down on every soul in the room. She described the charred remains of a village, houses leveled not by random explosives, but by precision strikes, the distinctive patterns of destruction. The child she helped dig through rubble to find a doll. The bodies, their arrangement inconsistent with chaotic insurgent attacks. Images appeared on the courtroom screens. Her photographs, evidence she had carried through fire and silence to bring here. The room grew still, the air thick, the sound of shuffling papers faded. It was as though the whole world held its breath while she spoke. "And you're certain it was Meridian personnel you saw afterward?" Emma asked softly. "Yes," Sophia said. "They wore unmarked tactical gear, but their weapons and procedures matched Meridian's proprietary systems. They weren't regular military." Emma nodded. "No further questions, Your Honor." The judge turned. "Your witness, Mr. Westbrook." Westbrook approached with the swagger of a man who had sprung this trap before. He projected confidence with every step, smiling faintly at the jury as though he were about to unravel a child's lie. "Ms. Hale," he began, You claim to be at these exact coordinates on May 17th, 2018. Correct. That's correct. He tapped a key. Satellite images flashed onto the courtroom screens. Then, perhaps you can explain how these images, taken that very day, show no humanitarian personnel in the area. In fact, they show insurgents occupying the village, making it impossible for aid workers to enter. He paused, certain he had struck the killing blow. But Sophia didn't flinch. Those aren't the correct images. The room stirred. Whispers rippled like wind across water. Judge Harmon leaned forward. That's a serious accusation, Ms. Hale. Sophia's gaze held steady. These images are time-stamped 11:15. The satellite passed overhead at 14:32 that day. The shadows in these photos indicate morning light, not afternoon. They're from a different date, or they've been altered. For the first time, Westbrook's smile faltered. He glanced at his team, who scrambled to produce papers. Stalling. The judge's voice hardened. Mr. Westbrook, verify the authenticity of these exhibits by recess. Until then, they will remain in question. Then he turned back. Ms. Hale, as per courtroom protocol, I must ask you to remove your jacket before we proceed. The request was routine. Witnesses were often asked to ensure they carried no devices. But when Sophia rose and slipped the blazer from her shoulders, the room fell into silence. On her black sleeve gleamed a small insignia, an eclipse with 3 stars arranged in a triangle. The judge froze. His face drained of color. That's not possible, he whispered, the words slipping out before he could stop them. Westbrook shot to his feet. Your Honor, we request an immediate recess. But no one was listening. The courtroom had already shifted. The trial was no longer about what Sophia Hale had seen. It was about who she really was. The courtroom emptied in a storm of whispers and hurried footsteps. But the silence had fallen when Sophia Hale revealed that insignia still clung to the air, heavy and suffocating. Judge Harmon had recessed the court until morning, but his eyes hadn't left Sophia once. He looked at her not as a witness anymore, but as someone carrying a truth too dangerous for the world to see. As the room cleared, 2 men in dark suits slipped through the rear doors. They didn't move like lawyers or journalists. Their gazes swept the room with the precision of predators. When their eyes landed on Sophia, they moved fast. Court security intercepted, tension flaring like a struck match. Emma Ramon, the prosecutor, seized a moment to cross the room. She lowered her voice as she reached Sophia's side. What just happened in there? Sophia's gaze didn't waver. They recognized me. Emma frowned. Recognized you as who? Sophia held her silence, a silence that spoke louder than any answer. An hour later, behind closed doors in Judge Harmon's chambers, the truth began to unravel. The judge leaned forward, his voice taut, almost brittle. That insignia belongs to a unit disbanded over 30 years ago. Shadow Eclipse. It ceased to exist in 1989. Officially, Sophia replied calmly. Harmon's jaw tightened. His knuckles pressed white against the oak table. Who are you, really? Sophia reached into her bag, pulling out a slim black folder. She slid it across the table. This is classified above your clearance. But given your past service, Judge, I believe you have a right to know. Emma leaned closer, tension in her chest. The judge opened the folder. His face shifted as he read. First confusion, then disbelief, and finally something colder. Fear. The document told a story no courtroom had ever heard aloud. Shadow Eclipse had not died in 1989. It had been resurrected quietly in 2003, reactivated for black operations in places America swore it had no presence. Operations written off as rumors, buried in silence. And Meridian Defense? They weren't just contractors. They were the cleaners, the ones hired to bury the evidence when things went wrong. The judge snapped the folder shut. His voice trembled just slightly. Why are you here without official backing? Where's your chain of command? Sophia's composure cracked, just for a heartbeat, a flicker of grief in her eyes. Dead, compromised, or unwilling to admit what happened. Someone has to speak for those who can't. Emma sat frozen, studying the woman before her. Suddenly details she had overlooked earlier came into sharp focus. The way Sophia never sat with her back to the door, the scars faintly etched into her hands, the unthinking way she had addressed the judge with military formality. And now the men in dark suits made sense. They weren't here to protect you, were they? Emma asked quietly. Sophia turned her head slowly. Her voice was almost a whisper. No, they're here to make sure I never testify again. That night, in a secure hotel guarded by U.S. Marshals, Sophia sat alone by the window. Outside, the city lights flickered, but her thoughts weren't on Washington. They were elsewhere. She remembered a funeral where she stood alone, a shadow among grieving families who never knew she had commanded their loved one's last mission. She remembered the wall in her apartment. Faces of the fallen pinned in neat rows, dates and places scribbled beneath, dates no official record would ever acknowledge. And she remembered the doctor's voice. Words clinical, detached. Terminal. 6 months. Maybe less. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Echo actual inbound 0900. Her hands trembled just slightly. Someone from her old unit was alive. But who? Across the city, the ripple of her revelation spread like wildfire. In a dimly lit study, General Michael Riker, retired but still feared, received a secure call. He hung up, grabbed a go bag, and left without a word. Judge Harmon made hushed phone calls to old military contacts, each one leaving him paler than before. Emma returned to her office only to discover sections of her case files had been accessed and redacted by hands far above her clearance. And in a private boardroom, Meridian CEO slammed his fist against the table. She was supposed to be dead already, he hissed. The next morning, the courthouse was transformed. The hallways swarmed with military officers in crisp dress uniforms. Government lawyers filed in, their expression stone. Security tripled. Armed guards at every entrance. Inside, Judge Harmon entered, face grave. He cleared his throat. Before we proceed, the defense has filed an emergency motion to exclude this witness on grounds of national security. A new attorney rose, slick, sharp, voice like a blade. Robert Thornton, Department of Justice. Your Honor, he said, Ms. Hale is attempting to disclose classified information that could compromise ongoing operations and endanger American lives. The judge turned slowly, his eyes locking on Sophia. Given these allegations, I must ask you directly. Who are you really? The courtroom held its breath. Sophia rose. Her posture shifted, subtle but undeniable. Civilian softness vanished. In its place stood a soldier, rigid spine, steady eyes, a quiet authority that filled the room. Commander Sophia Hale, she said. Shadow Eclipse. Special Operations. Honorably discharged, 2018. She placed a sealed folder on the evidence table. This contains the operational details of Shadowfall. The mission Meridian was hired to cover up. It includes the names of 37 civilians executed to hide America's presence where Congress forbade it. Thornton leapt to his feet. This woman has no authority to access or disclose classified information. But his words were drowned by a voice from the gallery. She has every authority. The room turned. An older man in a general's uniform stood. His voice carried the weight of decades in command. General Michael Riker. Commander Hale was one of our finest. If she says Meridian executed civilians, you'd better believe they did. The courtroom erupted. Reporters shouted. Lawyers argued. Security scrambled. But amid the chaos, Sophia stood perfectly still. Her eyes met the general's. And in that silent exchange, everyone understood this was no longer just a trial. It was a reckoning. The courthouse smelled different that morning. Not of polished wood and stale air, but of tension. Metallic, like blood in the mouth before a fight. The doors to Courtroom 3B were guarded by armed military police now. No phones, no laptops. Even the journalists had been stripped away. Only those with clearance remained. The trial was no longer a matter of public record. It was something else entirely. When Judge Harmon entered, his expression was grim. His gavel fell, but the echo seemed smaller, swallowed by the weight of what everyone already knew. This was no ordinary hearing anymore. The defense wasted no time. John Westbrook adjusted his tie and rose. Commander Hale, he said, his tone different now, less arrogant, more measured. If these events you described truly happened, why didn't you report them through your chain of command? Sophia sat straighter, her hands folded in her lap. I did, she replied. My after-action report detailed everything. It was classified, buried, locked away so deep it may as well never have existed. Westbrook paced slowly, like a man circling prey. And you expect us to believe the entire command structure conspired to conceal these so-called crimes? Not the entire structure, she answered quietly. Just the right people in the right positions. He stopped, tilted his head. Commander, isn't it possible your recollection is affected by trauma? Or perhaps by your medical condition? The words landed like stones. The courtroom stilled. Judge Harmon's jaw flexed. Careful, counselor. Sophia's eyes narrowed. My condition has nothing to do with my testimony. Westbrook pressed on, ignoring the warning. You have terminal cancer. Months to live, correct? Sophia's voice didn't waver. Correct. And you claim it came from chemical exposure during a mission that officially never happened? Yes, because it did happen. Westbrook leaned in, voice sharp as a knife. Or is it possible, Commander, that your diagnosis has given you motive? That these accusations are nothing more than your final act of vengeance against a system you feel abandoned you? The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Even Meridian's executives shifted uncomfortably at the cruelty of the question. Sophia didn't blink. If I wanted vengeance, she said evenly, there are faster ways. I'm here for justice. There's a difference. Her knuckles whitened against the stand. She swayed. A faint grimace flickered across her face. Then, suddenly, her body gave out. She collapsed. Gasps filled the room. Judge Harmon shot to his feet. Medic! Court officers rushed forward. Paramedics sprinting through the doors moments later. Emma Ramon ran with them, panic tightening her chest. Sophia lay pale and trembling, whispering through clenched teeth. Not yet, not until it's done. At George Washington University Hospital, the hallways echoed with hurried footsteps and clipped voices. Sophia was stabilized, but the doctors were clear. Her condition was deteriorating. Each collapse would come faster, each recovery slower. Emma stood in the waiting room when General Riker arrived. He didn't ask permission, just strode straight to her. How is she? Stable, but weak, Emma said softly. The doctor says she shouldn't testify again. Riker's jaw clenched. He looked older suddenly, burdened. That sounds like Sophia. Too stubborn to quit, even when her body's quitting on her. Emma studied him. You knew. Riker hesitated, then nodded slowly. She came to me years ago. Told me about Shadowfall. At the time, I thought it was PTSD. Guilt. I didn't listen. He swallowed hard, eyes lowering. I failed her. Emma shook her head. You're here now. That counts. In her hospital room, Sophia lay still and before running into her arm. She didn't open her eyes when the door creaked. I'm not finished, General, she said softly. Riker's voice low and steady. I know, Commander, and neither am I. The next day, against medical advice, Sophia returned to court. They wheeled her in, her frame thin, her face pale, but her eyes were steel. Judge Harmon leaned forward, voice heavy with concern. Commander, are you able to continue? Yes, Your Honor. She straightened in her chair. But first, I need to say something. She turned to the room. The Department of Defense and Justice have requested termination of these proceedings. National security. They say, I ask you to remember this. Classification exists to protect lives, not to bury the truth. The judge nodded slowly. Proceed. For the next 2 hours, Sophia dismantled Meridian's defense piece by piece. Photographs, original satellite images, communications logs, evidence drawn from hidden caches she'd been collecting for years. She named the operation Shadowfall. Shadow Eclipse was deployed to Kazara to extract an intelligence asset. Meridian was contracted to provide perimeter security. Instead, they executed a village. They called it insurgent activity. It wasn't. Her hand shook as she reached into her pocket. From it, she drew a small chain of dog tags. She placed them on the stand, one by one. Lieutenant Ezra Blackwood, killed protecting children. Captain Soren Khalil, executed while treating the wounded. Major Leona Frost, shot when she confronted Meridian's commander. Her voice stayed steady, but her skin was chalk white now. Each name she spoke was a wound reopened. When the last tag clinked against the wood, the silence in the courtroom was profound. Then General Riker rose. He stood at attention. 2 other officers followed. Together they saluted. Judge Harmon hesitated, emotion flickering across his stern face. Then he too stood, hand raised. Sophia returned the salute with perfect military form. For the first time, she looked less like a witness and more like the soldier she truly was. The trial was no longer about Meridian's crimes. It was about the ghosts of Shadowfall. The courthouse windows were blacked out now. Guards stood shoulder to shoulder at every door, rifles slung but ready. This wasn't a trial anymore. It felt like a war council. Inside, the air was thick with unease. Every chair creaked louder than it should have. Every cough felt like a warning. The stakes had grown beyond Meridian. Everyone in that room knew it. Judge Harmon opened with a voice heavy as iron. This proceeding is classified. Nothing leaves this room. Commander Hale, you may continue. Sophia adjusted herself in her wheelchair. She was thinner than the day before, her skin pale, but her posture remained unbroken. Shadowfall, she began, was never meant to be known. It was authorized under Directive SCI 7734, signed by then Deputy Director of Operations Martin Wells. The defense pounced. Westbrook rose, waving a document. This field order shows Meridian acted on intelligence indicating insurgents in the village. Sophia's lips curled into the faintest shadow of a smile. Orders still stand. Sanitized regardless of occupants. The words hung like smoke. The defense table erupted in frantic whispers. Meridian's executives leaned into each other, faces pale, eyes darting. Finally, Westbrook stood again, voice strained. Your Honor, my clients request a recess to discuss resolution options. Judge Harmon's gaze was flint. You will have 30 minutes. Behind closed doors, whispers turned into panic. Meridian's CO slammed his hand on the table. We were supposed to bury this years ago. How the hell is she still alive? But fear had replaced arrogance. For the first time, they looked less like titans of industry and more like cornered men. That evening, back in her secure hotel, Sophia sifted through notes. Pain etched her face. She swallowed a pill dry, steadied herself. A knock at the door. 3 sharp raps. She tensed, her hand brushing the knife concealed in her bag. Emma stepped in, carrying a heavy folder, her expression troubled. Someone accessed our case files again. Entire sections redacted. Before I could stop it, Sophia didn't look surprised. Not Meridian? No, Emma said softly. Someone higher. Someone in government. Sophia moved to the window, scanning the street below. Meridian pulled the trigger, but they had authorization. People who should have stopped them chose not to. Emma's voice dropped. Why disband Shadow Eclipse? Why erase you? Sophia's jaw tightened. They didn't disband us. They disavowed us. Same missions, same risks, but without a net. We became inconvenient, disposable. Her eyes darkened. After Shadowfall, Meridian was sent to erase the evidence. That included us. Emma's breath caught. You mean, most of my unit died in Kazara. The rest, suicides, accidents, all suspicious. 3 of us survived. She paused. One's hiding. One's locked in a psychiatric ward. And then there's me. Why now? Emma asked, voice trembling. Why not years ago? I tried, Sophia said bitterly, through every channel, proper and improper. No one listened. And now, she held up a pill bottle, shaking it lightly. Time is running out. Emma's eyes widened. You're dying. Terminal, Sophia confirmed. 6 months, maybe less. Cancer from exposure to weapons America swears we never used. The silence pressed between them until a buzz shattered it. Sophia's phone lit with a new message. Meet me in the lobby. Old friend. Emma's brow furrowed. Is that safe? Nothing's safe anymore. In the hotel lobby, a man sat with his back to the door. Sophia approached quietly. He didn't turn. You look like hell, Commander, he said softly. Her chest tightened. Major Quillen, she breathed. He slid a thumb drive across the table. Satellite imagery. May 17th, 2018. Original, unaltered. And comms logs from Meridian's tactical net. Proof they knew the village was clean. Sophia studied him. How did you get this? Quillen's gaze was hard. I still have friends in signal intelligence. They've been watching. You're not alone, Sophia. People want the truth out. They just can't risk their lives to do it. She pocketed the drive. Why now? He hesitated. Then his voice broke just slightly. I was supposed to be there. 2 days before deployment, they reassigned me. Those were my people too. Don't think I've slept a full night since. For the first time in years, Sophia felt something almost foreign. Relief. I have less to lose, she whispered. No, Quillen said firmly. You have the most to give. Back in her room, Sophia loaded the drive into a secure laptop. Files unfolded on the screen. Images, transmissions, documents. The proof she needed. But as she leaned closer, pain ripped through her chest. She doubled over, gasping, waiting for it to pass. Her hand trembled as she pressed it flat against the table. Not yet, she whispered through clenched teeth. Not until it's done. Morning came. The courtroom looked different now. Reporters gone. Windows sealed. Court reporters with top-secret clearance sat in silence, pens ready. This proceeding, Judge Harmon declared, is classified at the highest level. Disclosure carries severe penalties under the Espionage Act. Sophia rolled forward in her wheelchair, pale but unbroken. Emma rose. Commander Hale, please explain your knowledge of Operation Shadowfall. And with that, the ghost of Kazara filled the room. Sophia spoke of blood, betrayal, and orders that should never have been given, of civilians erased because their deaths were more convenient than their survival, of Meridian, paid not to protect, but to silence. And as her voice carried through that locked courtroom, the world outside had no idea that history itself was being rewritten. The courtroom no longer felt like a courtroom. It felt like a bunker. Windows covered, security doubled, the air so heavy with tension it was hard to breathe. Judge Harmon's gavel struck. Commander Hale, you may continue. Sophia gripped the stand. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from the cancer burning her body hollow. Every breath cost her something now, but her eyes were fire. Shadow Eclipse was deployed to Kazara in 2018, she began. Our mission was simple. Extraction, no combat, no engagement with civilians. Meridian was contracted to provide security. She paused. Her gaze cut to Meridian's executives, sitting pale and silent. They didn't provide security. They executed a village. Men, women, children, 37 souls. Emma Ramon slid the thumb drive across the table. Your Honor, Exhibit 142. The screens came alive. Images, audio, maps. Satellite photos showed civilians moving in the streets hours before the strike. Audio logs played voices admitting no insurgents. Orders stand. Clean the site. Comm chatter confirmed Meridian knew. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Even the seasoned officers in the gallery shifted uncomfortably. Then Sophia reached into her pocket. Slowly, she drew a chain of dog tags. One by one, she laid them on the stand. Lieutenant Ezra Blackwood, Captain Soren Khalil, Major Leona Frost. Her voice cracked slightly, but she pressed on. They died trying to protect innocents. Meridian killed them too, to erase witnesses. The last tag clinked down. General Riker stood. His salute was crisp, sharp. 2 officers followed. Then Judge Harmon himself, his voice thick, rose and saluted. Sophia returned the gesture with military perfection. For a heartbeat, the ghost of Shadowfall stood in the room with them. The defense had no arrogance left. Westbrook rose. but his voice was hollow. Your Honor, my clients request a recess to explore resolution. Judge Harmon's gaze was granted. You have 30 minutes. In the following days, closed-door meetings stretched into nights. Meridian's empire began to crumble. They agreed to a plea. Guilty to unlawful use of force, conspiracy, obstruction. Their executives would face prison. Families of the dead would receive compensation through an international fund. And in a classified addendum, Shadow Eclipse was acknowledged, not erased, not forgotten. For Sophia, it was victory. Not enough, but something. Her body, though, was failing. At Walter Reed, she lay pale against white sheets, and Ford dripping steadily. The war inside her bones was one she could not win. Riker visited daily. Emma, too. One afternoon, a quiet figure entered Major Quillen. He placed something on her table. A patch, black and silver. An eclipse with 3 stars. They're making them again, he whispered. Officially. Sophia's fingers brushed the cloth. A small smile touched her lips. 2 months later, a classified ceremony was held deep in the Pentagon. Families of the fallen were granted temporary clearance. For the first time, they heard the truth. Each was handed posthumous medals, silver stars, recognition that had been denied too long. Sophia was wheeled in, frail but upright. She spoke to each family, sharing memories that had been locked away behind walls of secrecy. He always carried your daughter's photo, she told one widow. She said you were the reason she kept fighting, she told a grieving mother. By the end, she was exhausted, but for the first time in years, at peace. As Riker wheeled her out, she whispered, "Now, I can go." 3 weeks later, Commander Sophia Hale died quietly in her sleep. Her obituary in the Washington Post mentioned only her decorated service. No word of Shadow Eclipse. No mention of Shadowfall. But at Arlington, her headstone bore the insignia of the eclipse with 3 stars. Beneath it, only one line. She spoke for those who could not. The ripples spread. Congress passed new oversight laws for private military contractors, nicknamed the Hale Protocols. The Pentagon added new accountability measures for classified missions. And at the War College, General Riker taught a new module, Ethics and Shadows. He ended every lecture the same way. Remember the name Sophia Hale. She never asked for recognition, but she deserved it more than anyone. Months later, Emma visited Arlington. At Sophia's grave, she found small tokens left behind. The insignia of Shadow Eclipse. Not once, not twice, many. They've been coming for weeks, a groundskeeper told her. Different people, military mostly. They never say a word, just leave the mark. Emma stood silently. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying echoes of voices long gone. And she wondered how many more stories like this were buried beneath seals and silence. Her phone buzzed. A new case. Another whistleblower. A voice on the line, hesitant. "I serve with Commander Hale." She said if anything happened, you were the one to trust. Emma drew a breath. "I'm listening." The screen fades to black. "And now it's your turn. If you were Sophia Hale, facing death, carrying truths the world isn't ready to hear, would you risk everything to speak out, or would you stay silent?"